Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast. BrightWord is a leading platform for diverse storytelling, where voices from all backgrounds can share their unique narratives and connect with readers from around the world. Follow our regular podcast updates, where we strive to foster a literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature. Hello, and welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast. I'm John Lobb, and today I'm delighted to be joined for a second time by Lorin Zaner, author of The Making of Darth Zaner. In this book, seasoned defense attorney Lorin Zaner pulls back the curtain on the high-stakes, high-pressure world of criminal defense. Loaded with stories of actual cases and candid reflections, Zaner offers a rare behind-the-scenes look at some of his most wild and shocking battles in the courtroom, and what it takes to defend some rightly and wrongly accused individuals. The Making of Darth Zaner is an entertaining and informative meditation on the nature of justice, the price of being a defense attorney, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves their day in court. Mr. Zaner, thank you so much for joining us again. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you, John.
You too. And to kick things off, let me ask, since the book has come out and the last time you appeared, have you gotten any feedback from readers that has surprised you? Anything interesting?
Well, all of the feedback has been positive. I haven't really, that I'm aware of, gotten any negative reviews. One of the more interesting ones was about a week ago. I received an email from a personal injury attorney I know, Chuck Boyk, here in Toledo, and he said he heard about the book and wanted to contact me and do a podcast because he really loved the book. And so last Friday, I actually did a podcast with him, which was a lot of fun and pretty interesting.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like defense attorneys must have lots of war stories to share from time to time.
Well, I certainly do in a lot of areas, not only in defense, but I did so many different areas of law, including domestic and civil and personal injury. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I think I have a lot to share.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, when you say about everyone deserves their day in court, have you ever represented someone that maybe down deep you felt like they didn't deserve their day in court, like that perhaps they weren't clearly innocent and yet it was your job to represent them to the best of your ability?
Bottom line, innocence really is not an issue for me, whether they're guilty or not guilty. The issue for me is whether or not the state has the evidence to prove it. Believing in the Constitution, everybody has a constitutional right to have effective assistance of counsel and to be represented in court. And if the state doesn't have the evidence to proceed, it's not my job to make those decisions as far as guilt or innocence. That's up to a jury. And if the state doesn't have the evidence, then we're going to trial. My client's hopefully going to be found not guilty.
Interesting. I know that you share a lot of details to the extent that you're able about different cases. Were there any cases that you didn't fully unpack, didn't share everything, and you wished you had shared more?
Well, one of them for sure was a case I had where my client was charged with felonious assault, attacking an individual on the street by hitting him with his car. And to me, it's a real sad case. I don't know whether my client was innocent or not. He was found guilty at trial. There were three independent witnesses who testified against him. But if the police would have done their job and would have gone out to the scene and investigated and done some measurements, because my client indicated he went out of this parking lot one way, which would have damaged the grass. He hit a curb, which damaged his muffler, which he had to replace, whereas the three witnesses had him going out a different place from a different driveway. If the police would have done their job, and if they would have investigated and found evidence that my client actually went out the way he said, would have been a whole different story. If they would have investigated and found out that, in fact, what he said is not accurate, well, then I would have tried to make a plea bargain to work out the case as opposed to taking the risk of going to trial. I got involved with the case at a time it was really too late to try to uncover that information. But if the police would have done their job because they knew what my client had said because he talked to them that night, it could have made a whole lot of difference. So to me, it's very disappointing the police jump to conclusions, don't do their job, don't do a thorough and proper investigation, which can lead to convictions and possibly false convictions.
Interesting. When you talk about the police not doing your job, we all remember the OJ case, and it may be a quarter century after the fact. Do you consider, and perhaps this is an unfair question, but do you consider the OJ case a demonstration of a really successful defense strategy, or were there just too many extenuating circumstances with the fame involved and the racial overtones and so forth?
Well, part of it in that case is where the case was tried. The case being involved in Los Angeles, which has, I believe, a pretty heavy black community, and OJ was obviously somewhat of a hero there. I think where the case was tried went a long way towards him being found not guilty. I believe if it would have been tried in other counties, he very well could have been found guilty. Once again, the state didn't have the evidence to prove that he did it. And the bottom line, the prosecutor screwed up with the glove and the famous quote from Johnny Cochran. We all know that. We all remember that, and people talk about it today.
Absolutely. Any cases that you were involved with that you still dwell on from time to time that you can't get out of your mind?
Well, the cases you can't get out of your mind are the ones that you lost that you thought you should have won. The one case I talked about with the parking lot situation, another one where I needed 5 expert witnesses. My client couldn't afford 5 expert witnesses, and the state had their 5 experts, which put my client at a distinct disadvantage at trial. And I believe the science was accurate for her that she should have been found not guilty, but it was too tough to overcome those experts. Another case where an attorney took his client in to talk to the police about what happened. And this was a seasoned, one of the top criminal defense lawyers in town. I think he screwed up by not having his client demonstrate to him what he was going to show to the police as to what he did, which was striking the individual, because what he did was a full power, strong punch, which ended up knocking the person over. The person hit his head and passed away. I clearly think it was a case of self defense. And if the defense attorney would have prepared his client better in talking to the police, I think there would have been a better chance to be found not guilty. In fact, that was my first loss after about 13 in a row not guilty verdicts, which was pretty demoralizing.
Absolutely, but a pretty good record to that point.
Well, fortunately, over my career, I've had a lot of success and a lot of not guilties, but you don't win them all.
Absolutely, and to that point, have you ever had a case where a defendant is found guilty, they're going to prison, and they blame you for not doing enough?
I don't know that I've ever had a client blame me after they've been found guilty. There's been a few appeals where the new attorney would file ineffective assistance of counsel as far as one of the issues, but those have never been successful. I've never been sued by criminal defense clients for doing anything improper. In fact, there was a case where my client went to trial, was found guilty of murder. And a couple years later, we were able to find evidence that actually got him out of prison because he actually didn't do the crime. And he filed a lawsuit against all kinds of people, but he wouldn't include me as a defendant.
Good to know. Good to know. What talk about the concept of justice. Is there a perfect justice, or is justice only as good as you play the game? Some people say, like with taxes, there's a tax rate, but what you pay ultimately depends on what you can do in terms of tax shelters and how well you know the tax code and so forth. Can you play the game to get better justice?
Well, the problem with the system is it's not perfect and it really is geared towards people that have money. I gave a speech at the Reverend Al Sharpton's place in Harlem in New York City about representing indigents. And I did a lot of research that an indigent has a right to have an attorney, of course. They have a right to have money for an investigator and an expert, but the court doesn't have to give them money for the best expert. The court doesn't have to give money for, like the one case I talked about where there is 5 experts. So a person that has money can afford the funds to hire a private investigator, can afford the funds to hire all the experts that they need. So there's clearly a big disadvantage for the people that don't have the resources to fight the state, because the state essentially has unlimited resources to get experts. A lot of their experts testify for free because they're all pro prosecutor. And to try to get defense experts, they take money, not because you're buying their testimony, but you're paying for their time away from their normal practice.
What would you say to a young man or woman graduating from law school and they just passed the bar? Would you recommend becoming a defense attorney today?
Absolutely. I have no regrets about becoming a criminal defense attorney and doing a general practice, which included all kinds of different things. If you really want to hone your skills, you should take those classes in law school that assist you. If they have clinics that you can get involved with trial practice and actually being in the courtroom. I mean, I started being in the courtroom my second year and continuously as a public defender. Even when I was in law school, I ran a program which was called a pretrial release program where I was in court every morning, got the opportunity to observe all kinds of different attorneys and what was happening in the court. So I learned so much when I started practicing law that helped me immensely. A lot of people that come out of law school, I mean, law school teaches you essentially how to think and how to reason, how to research. If somebody comes into your office, you can determine what kind of case it is from what they're talking to you about, but it doesn't give you the skills to be in a courtroom and to handle trials and all the other issues that go with it. But being involved in clinics and things of that nature, or even we're helping other attorneys while you're going through law school, all of that will assist you when you get into practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great advice. The persona of Darth Zaner, it's kind of a description of the necessary transformation you went through as a defense attorney. Can you talk a little bit about Darth Zaner and what that represents, or who he represents?
Well, as I indicated previously, but I'll say it again, I had a case where I represented a police officer charged with sex trafficking. And it was obviously a very contentious trial. And we went to trial. My client was found not guilty. And one of the women who represents victims of sex trafficking came up to me and said, "Lorin, we have a name for you." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Darth Zaner." And I said, "Well, thank you very much. I like that." And so when I'm in a court, I'm there to have my client found not guilty. I'm not there to be a nice person. I'm not there to make friends. When I'm outside of court, it's a whole different story. I don't have to demonstrate what I do or what I can do in a courtroom. But when I'm in a courtroom, I will follow the rules. I will act ethically with what I do. But yeah, I have a transformation when I get into court. I can turn into a different person.
Interesting. And it sounds like a very successful persona at that. Do you
Yes.
have just a personal question? Do you have a preference between jury trials and bench trials?
Well, most often you want to do a jury trial because in a jury trial, the jury is usually composed of 12 people, especially in a felony, and you only need one person to hang the jury if you can't get a complete verdict. Whereas if you're trying a case to a judge, it's one person. And at least in Ohio, the common pleas judges that handle felony cases are all elected. Many times they're up for election the year that you're in trial, especially if it's a high profile case. Trying a case to the bench is a risk that not only does the judge going to worry about the facts, but is he going to worry about himself or herself more so and make a decision against your client because of politics, because of continuing as a judgeship. So Very rarely did I waive jury trials. There were some occasions which I did. My first shaken baby case, we waived the jury. We had a dead baby. The pictures were horrendous, and that would really strike a chord with the jury. But we had a medical issue, and I felt that, and I knew the judge, he was a new judge, didn't come from the prosecutor's office where most of them come from, and I felt he could be fair and impartial. And in fact, the judge's public defender was in my office, and we had a lot of conversations about whether or not to waive a jury, and he convinced me to do that, and it was successful. There was another case I waived a jury. The judge, when he was a prosecutor, I know for a fact that the judge tried to have criminal charges filed against me for suborning perjury, which never happened and no charges were ever filed. But I waived a jury in front of him and tried the case to the bench because I had a technical issue that I felt the judge would be in better position than a jury. And in fact, the judge did what I felt he should do. My client was charged with a felony. The judge found him guilty of a misdemeanor, which is what should have happened. And the prosecutor would never offer that. So we went to trial, and it turned out to be the right thing.
Interesting. So it's a reminder that with all the stakes involved in the criminal justice system, at the end of the day, it's human beings, whether it's the judge or jury or the defendant, we're all people. And so we necessarily have certain biases or pre-thoughts. I imagine even when they say to a jury, you have to disregard everything that hasn't been presented as evidence, but they're still people. They still were born a certain way, grew up a certain way. And some, unfortunately or fortunately, would say, I'm never going to find a person guilty of that. I just won't do it to them, no matter what. And the next guy is, well, I'm always going to, if they were accused of something, they must be guilty. I'm always going to go for guilty.
Which is why the voir dire process, picking a jury, is so important in a case, because you try to weed out those people, but you can't necessarily get them all because people will lie. I had one jury that the jury came back after deliberating, and it was a hung 11-1 for not guilty. And the one juror lied on my questioning of her. She had been sexually abused as a child, which she totally denied that ever happening. And when the child testified in this case, she totally shut down and wouldn't listen to anything. Eventually, the prosecutor dismissed. Sorry, that was my dog.
I saw you have a little assistant there.
Eventually, eventually, the prosecutor dismissed the case, but and the system's not perfect, but it's the best system we have.
Absolutely. And for better or for worse, it's what we all depend on. If you could change one thing about the system, would it be removing the aspect of money? Is that a question you can answer?
Well, there's probably two things. One, I didn't even think about the money issue, but that's certainly one. But the other issue is, at least as I said, in Ohio, the judges are elected. My daughter-in-law's from Spain. She was our foreign exchange student, and her brother is a judge in Spain. And they don't have elections. They're chosen based on merit. They have to go through a bunch of testing procedures and a bunch of classes. I think that would make more sense than to have judges being elected. I don't know if you can find an impartial panel where politics doesn't get involved. That would be the hope that you could. I would think selecting judges based on merit, where they don't have to run for elections and they're not beholden to the public and making decisions to try to stay in office. I think there might be some sense in that, but not likely that's ever going to happen.
Interesting. Talking about media, do you read any John Grisham novels? Do you watch Law and Order? How is the system portrayed in media? Is it accurate or is it sensational?
Well, I think I've read almost all of John Grisham's novels. And the interesting thing is, on my shaken baby case, I had filed a motion to appoint a special process individual to go and pick up information or exhibits from the coroner's office and send them to one of my experts, because the state doesn't have a right to know who your expert is until you decide to use them. And the judge asked me, where did you come up with that idea for that motion? Because he'd never seen it before. I said, it was a John Grisham novel. He got a big kick out of that.
Wonderful. So that was media making its way into real life.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Lorin, what is next for you? Are you writing another book?
No, it's not my plan to write another book. I really got out of my head what I thought I needed to put on paper about my life as a lawyer and why I became a lawyer and a lot of the interesting cases I had. If I would write another novel, it would be likely fiction. And to do it right, that takes a lot of work and a lot of research to do all of that. So it's really not my desire to write another book. I was asked the question, would I take on any new cases because I'm essentially retired? And I guess I have to admit, if the right facts and circumstances showed up on my doorstep with enough funds for experts and investigators and myself, I might be interested in working with another attorney on the case. But other than that, I'm enjoying being retired, enjoying living my life. I get calls from attorneys often for legal advice. I just gave an attorney some legal advice last week. So I'm always out there to help. I've lectured around the country. I would be happy to lecture, go to the law school, and provide some information, which I think I have a lot. As to opening up an office again and starting to practice, not doing it.
Don't blame you. It sounds like you're in an ideal setup at this point, and we're sure all appreciative, though, of everything that you put into the book, The Making of Darth Zaner. I'm assuming it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere fine books are sold.
I don't know about Barnes & Noble, but it's definitely available on Amazon or from the original printer, Orange Fraser Press down in Wilmington.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Lorin, for visiting with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure following up with you. And for anyone who was interested, I know the book would not leave you wanting. The Making of Darth Zaner. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, John. Have a good day.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all on the next podcast. You've been listening to the BrightWord Books Podcast, home of the literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss future episodes. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.